In Japan's feudal heartland, in a whirlwind of warfare and rivalry, the legendary figure of Miyamoto Musashi arose, a wandering samurai, swordmaster, and brilliant strategist. His real story merges with the legends that have arisen due to his extraordinary feats. His epic duels, his incessant quest for technical perfection, and his untamed spirit have inspired admiration and fascination for centuries. The lone samurai, Musashi, who followed the path of the sword and became a Japanese cultural icon. But who was the man behind the myth? A ruthless duelist pursuing glory through the death of his opponents? Or a martial artist and philosopher whose sword was the path to enlightenment and harmony? The year was 1584. Japan was experiencing a stormy period, with feudal lords vying for power and land. Against this setting, in the quiet village of Miyamoto, a boy destined for greatness was born. His name was Benosuke, but the baby's arrival was marred by tragedy. His mother, Omasa, collapsed from childbirth complications, leaving the newborn motherless in his early days. The premature loss of his mother deeply impacted Benosuke's childhood. Raised by his father, the swordmaster Miyamoto Munisai, and monk uncle, the young man grew up under the shadow of tragedy, developing an independent spirit and a deep attachment to loneliness. Through adversity, the young man built up an unwavering inner strength and determination, traits that would propel him on his journey as a samurai and turn him into the legend we know as Miyamoto Musashi. Robbed of his mother's affection, Benosuke found in his father, Miyamoto Munisai, a ruthless master. A skilled samurai, well known for his masterful swordsmanship and jite, Munisai devoted himself to instructing his son in the ways of the warrior. Benosuke exhibited a natural ability for combat from an early age and quickly grasped the techniques taught to him by his father. The jite, an iron weapon with a hook, was to become Munisai's specialty, and the young man learned to use it skillfully, evolving a unique fighting style that combined strength and precision. But Benosuke's education was not confined to the sword. His uncle, the Buddhist monk Dorin, relentlessly tried to inspire in him values of compassion, mental discipline, and the search for self-knowledge. But Benosuke was a rebel boy. The father-son relationship was a mixture of admiration and rebellion. Hungry for more knowledge and acknowledgement, Benosuke questioned Munisai's teachings, seeking to go further than tradition and shape his own fighting style. Munisai was a traditionalist and considered his son's boldness an outrage. Arguments between the two grew increasingly frequent, and these brawls were exacerbated by Munisai's heavy drinking. This led to a heartbreaking estrangement between father and son. Benosuke, feeling misunderstood and yearning to prove himself, decided to leave home and make his own way. He adopted a new name, a symbol of his independence and his resolve to become a samurai recognized for his own abilities. Takezo, the new name chosen by Benosuke, signified a fresh start, a break with the past, and the search for a glorious future. Freed from the bonds of tradition, the young warrior was prepared to face the world's challenges, brandishing his weapon and unwavering determination. Takezo started living in the woods like a beast. He was aggressive, and when he encountered other young men on his path, their meetings almost always ended in conflict. Spurred on by a burning desire to establish his superiority, Takezo flung himself into fights, testing his skills and learning from each engagement. He was strong and brave, and with each victory, his confidence grew, boosting his ego and ambition to become a swordsman. At 13, the flame of ambition was already blazing in Takezo's heart. The news that Harima Kihei, a celebrated samurai and adept at the traditional Shinto-ryu school, was challenging anyone who dared to take him on. He was traveling around Japan, defying other swordsmen to test and display their skills. Kihei accepted duels as a way of increasing his own fame and testing his combat techniques. Aware of his son's inexperience, Munisai banned him from taking part in the duel, but Takezo, blindsided by his youthful temerity, disobeyed his father and inscribed his name on the billboard in defiance of his father's authority. News of the challenge quickly spread. Takezo's courage in facing unexperienced samurai like Harima Kihei sparked astonishment and disbelief. When Harima Kihei learned that it was a 13-year-old boy who had accepted the challenge, he approached the boy's monk uncle. He told him that, at the appointed time, Takezo would have to show up and apologize before everyone for his childish antics. The monk said he would talk to the boy, but warned the warrior that he was not a normal kid. His spirit was like that of the forest beasts, and it was rumored that he trained his skills with the mountain Tengu. When the time came, the square was crowded with onlookers, eager to witness the unequal confrontation. In his imposing black robes, Harima Kihei entered the combat arena, wielding his katana. Takezo, clad in simple clothing and carrying a wooden bokken, looked fragile and unprepared against the veteran samurai. It looked like David versus Goliath. Takezo was not there to apologize, but to fight. The duel commenced. With powerful thrusts, Harima Kihei attacked mercilessly, hoping to end the fight quickly, because he could not risk being humiliated by a young boy. Agile and intuitive, Takezo deftly dodged the blows, using his youth and speed as weapons. The young man then showed surprising determination and ferocity. Musashi attacked Kihei with all his strength and speed, surprising his opponent. Not having expected such an aggressive offensive from a boy, Kihei was rapidly overpowered and put on the defensive. Musashi disarmed him and, with a powerful blow, seriously wounded Kihei in the head. The duel resulted in Harima Kihei's death from head trauma, marking Musashi's first victory in Mortal Kombat. Takezo's triumph further inflated the young man's wild ego, which would later become known as Musashi. This duel made a profound impact on Musashi's life. The victory over a trained and experienced swordsman not only cemented his confidence in his abilities, but also set him on the path to becoming a legend. However, while Takezo was starting to prove his prowess as a swordsman, he still had the spirit of a forest demon. However, if he could not tame his inner beast, he would never achieve the greatness he sought. Following his surprising victory over the experienced samurai, Takezo's name spread as a talented young swordsman. But his brashness and arrogance also took precedence, making enemies wherever he went. Both proud and impulsive, Takezo never backed down from a fight. He viewed fighting to sharpen his skills and assert his superiority, commanding respect through brute force. The alleys and clearings around Hirafuku turned into scenarios for impromptu duels, where Takezo vented his fury. However, he was captured one day and handed over to the famous Zen Buddhist monk Takuan Soho, who guaranteed his captors that he would bend the savage spirit of that beast. The monk tied Musashi up and hung him from a tree branch. The young man ranted uncontrollably at the monk, who took the most appalling insults and threats without letting his spirit be shaken. Takezo found himself powerless and humiliated. The silent forest magnified his loneliness and pushed him to confront his own demons. Takezo was bound to the tree for days, with Takuan visiting him sporadically, not to free him, but to tease him with questions and teachings. True strength lies not only in the muscles, but in the mind, Takuan said. The sword is a powerful tool, but it can be used for good or evil. A true samurai pursues harmony, not destruction. The tree experience served as a trigger for Takezo's transformation. He was faced with his own hubris and impulsiveness and started to understand the significance of patience, strategy, and self-control. From that moment on, Takuan became a guiding light in Takezo's life, steering him through doubtful periods and advising him on his self-improvement journey. Japan was nearing a tipping point. Each day, tensions between Toyotomi and Tokugawa clans, who fought over control of the country, grew louder. War rumors reverberated through the villages, spread by merchants and travelers. With samurai sharpening their swords and feudal lords conscripting soldiers, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and trepidation. Despite his youthful age, Takezo felt the call of battle. War was an opportunity to prove his worth on a larger stage, to test his skills in real combat, and to achieve the glory he longed for. He had been inspired by the stories of great warriors and believed that his destiny was to be found on the battlefield, where he would be able to fight alongside other samurai and leave his mark on Japan's history. The coming war was not only a threat, but it also held the promise of adventure and prestige for the young and ambitious Takezo. The Battle of Sekigahara was approaching like an ominous storm, poised to shake the bedrock of feudal Japan. The year was 1600, and the country was torn apart, with the Toyotomi and Tokugawa clans disputing supreme power. On one hand, the Toyotomi, led by Hideyori, son and heir of the late Toyotomi unifier, Hideyoshi. On the other, Tokugawa Ieyasu, a shrewd and ambitious feudal lord, bent on capturing control of Japan for himself. Between the two clans, tension was spreading, flaring up the ambitions of samurai and feudal lords throughout Japan. This was a shifting period of alliances and betrayals, where loyalty was tested by the sword. Driven by a fierce desire to prove his worth, Takezo decided to join the forces of the Western Army, allied to the Toyotomi. He enlisted under the Shinmen clan banner, led by Ukita Hideye, one of the most powerful and loyal feudal lords in Hideyori's service. The Shinmen were famed for their bravery and skill in combat, with Takezo seeing them as an exciting opportunity to fight alongside seasoned warriors and make his mark on the battlefield. Takezo's decision to join the Shinmen clan was not just a matter of chance. He felt a deep admiration for Ukita Hideye, a leader who epitomized loyalty, courage, and honor, which the young samurai fought for himself. The clan's ties to his paternal family, using the name Shinmen, also shared by his father, reinforced his sense of belonging and his desire to fight for a greater cause. Sekigahara was the ideal platform for him to show the world his sword skills and achieve the glory he longed for. He felt that his fate was inextricably woven with the fate of Japan, with his sword shaping the country's future. The morning sun had hardly risen when both armies met on the Sekigahara plain. The cold fog of dawn still blanketed the battlefield, forming a ghostly atmosphere that heralded the horror to come. The tension-filled silence was broken only by the clanking of armor, the neighing of horses, and the whispered orders of commanders. Among the throng of samurai, Takezo felt the heart pounding in his chest. A primitive and inevitable feeling of fear tried to overwhelm him, but he suppressed it with the sheer force of his will. Adrenaline rushed through his veins, piquing his senses and readying him for combat. The sound of roaring cannons burst the silence, hurling iron balls across the sky and exploding among the enemy troops. The earth trembled underfoot, and gunpowder smoke mingled with the mist, obscuring the battlefield. War cries echoed everywhere as samurai clashed in a turmoil of steel and wrath. The clanking of swords joined the pain cries and wails of the dying. The smell of blood and gunpowder pervaded the air, making for a sickening and terrifying atmosphere. Wielding his sword, Takezo threw himself into the fight with the savagery of a hungry wolf. He moved with agility, ducking enemy blows and counterattacking with precision. He danced with his sword, expertly trained through years of discipline, making his way through the carnage. While the battle records do not document his deeds in detail, fragmentary accounts mention the bravery of a young samurai who fought with a demon's fury. His sword was said to be merciless, tearing down enemies like dry leaves in the wind. There were even whispers that he had the strength of a tengu, a legendary mountain spirit capable of superhuman feats. One tale spoken in murmurs by survivors described Takezo facing a band of enemy samurai alone, protecting the rear of his troops. He was fast as lightning, his sword cutting through armor and flesh with a surgeon's precision. He was said to have struck down 7 enemies before receiving a wound to the arm. Hurt but not crushed, Takezo kept fighting, inspired by loyalty to his clan and the will to survive. The battle went on for hours, a ghoulish dance of death and destruction. But the fate of the battle was already sealed. Ieyasu's betrayals and strategic ploys crippled crippled the Western Army, which found itself at a numerical and strategic disadvantage. Defeat was looming. The once lush plains of Sekigahara were now carpeted with corpses, a grotesque mass of death and destruction. The shattered and demoralized Western Army was yielding to the Tokugawa. Wounded and depleted, Takezo found himself in the middle of the stampede. The defeat was embittering, a blow to his pride and ambitions. He had fought bravely, but the victory he had so longed for slipped through his fingers. The burden of uncertainty was worse than the defeat itself. The Tokugawa had captured the feudal lord Ukita Hideye. His fate was unclear, as was the future of the Shinmin clan. Takezo was alone, a masterless ronin with no purpose, drifting through a country that was now bowing to a new power. The consequences of defeat were unforgiving. The disbanded Shinmin clan lost its lands and privileges. Condemned to exile, Ukita Hideye ended his life as a Buddhist monk. His military glory turned to dust. Scarred by the battle and the loss of his clan, Takezo was struck by a dilemma. To whom did he now owe his loyalty? To the Toyotomi, whose cause had been trampled underfoot, or to the Tokugawa, the new rulers of Japan? His heart was wrenched between loyalty to the past and the need to survive in a new world. Ukita Hideye, a leader he admired, stood in stark contrast to Tokugawa Ieyasu, the ruthless victor. The defeat at Sekigahara and the breakup of the Shinmin clan forced Takezo to come to terms with the frailty of loyalty in a world where ambition and betrayal reigned supreme. He needed to forge his own path, establish his values, and choose his destiny in a war-torn Japan. The dilemma tormented him for years, shaping his philosophy and his quest for a fighting style that surpassed the limitations of tradition and blind loyalty. Sekigahara was more than a military defeat for Takezo. It was a harsh awakening to the world's reality. Blind loyalty, battle glory, the promises of a thriving future under the banner of a powerful clan, all faded like smoke when faced with the ruthless reality of defeat. Drifting aimlessly along the dusty roads of Japan, Takezo bore the battle scars and the pounding uncertainty. Takuan's words rang in his mind. True strength lies not only in the muscles, but in the mind. He would need to find a new purpose, a path that would allow him to provide meaning to his life in a world that appeared to have lost its way. The Sekigahara experience sowed the seeds of a pragmatic and individualistic philosophy in Takezo. Defeat taught him that allegiance to a clan or feudal lord could be fleeting, and that glory in battle was often a fleeting illusion. He understood that true strength resided in the ability to adapt, to overcome adversity, and to find within oneself the resolve to carry on, even when all appeared lost. Once viewed as an instrument of war and a quest for glory, the sword turned into a self-knowledge and self-improvement tool. Takezo started to look to the sword not only for mastery of technique, but also for mental discipline and inner balance. Decided to walk his own path, Takezo left behind the name of his youth and took on the identity that would immortalize him, Miyamoto Musashi, a name that symbolized a break with the past, the pursuit of a new identity, and the commitment to becoming a one-of-a-kind samurai, free from the chains of tradition and politics. Miyamoto Musashi's legend, the invincible samurai, had only just begun. The battle dust still lingered in the air, blown by the chilly wind over the Sekigahara plain. Bodies were scattered around the field, a silent reminder of the brutal conflict that had changed the fate of Japan forever. Young Musashi was among the wounded, his right arm pierced by an enemy spear. He had dragged himself through the slaughter, desperately trying to flee that netherworld. The searing pain in his arm was agonizing, but the wound in his pride was even greater. The Western Army's rout, the dissolution of his clan, and the confusion over the fate of his lord Ukita Hideye left him lost and bewildered. With the help of peasants he met along the way, Musashi made it to a village where he was given first aid for his wound. But the recovery was slow and painful. With no resources, he depended on the mercy of strangers to survive. Distraught and isolated, Musashi took revenge in a small hut on the village outskirts. Solitude and boredom became his greatest enemies. As his body slowly healed, his mind was tormented by uncertainty and questions. What was he to do now? What was his place in a Tokugawa-dominated Japan? Once the icon of his ambitions for glory, the sword now represented the pain of defeat and the uncertainties of the future. Musashi found himself at a crossroads, not knowing which way to go. But the flame that had been burning in his heart since childhood was not entirely extinguished. Driven by the need to overcome adversity and find a new purpose, Musashi undertook an intense self-improvement period. Over the days and nights of his convalescence, Musashi dedicated his time to working out his body and mind. He practiced breathing and meditation techniques, learnt from his monk uncle, to fortify his spirit and control his consuming rage. Musashi also studied military strategy and philosophy to understand the causes of the Sekigahara defeat and draw lessons from past mistakes. He devoured books on history, war tactics, and wisdom from sages such as Confucius and Lao Tzu, trying to find knowledge and inspiration to shape his future. But the sword continued to call him. Musashi knew that the martial arts were an essential part of his identity, and he had to find a new way to express himself through them. He went on to train relentlessly, experimenting with new techniques and developing his own style, one that was more fluid, intuitive, and suited to different circumstances. He learned how to use his body as a weapon, mixing agility, strength, and accuracy in his movements. He found the importance of timing, observation, and anticipating his opponent's movements. He found that long walks through the Japanese mountains and forests were an essential part of his training. In nature, Musashi found the inner peace and inspiration to connect with his intuition and refined his skills as a samurai. After this wandering and self-improvement period, Musashi was transformed. The physical and emotional Sekigahara scars became reminders of his toughness and determination. He emerged as a more mature warrior, both disciplined and self-aware of his strength. Now honed by suffering and reflection, the sword was ready to be wielded for a new purpose, the drive for technical perfection, and the building of a legacy that would render him immortal. With its majestic temples and peaceful gardens, the ancient capital, Kyoto, was also a vibrant center of culture and martial arts. Several fencing schools, each with their own traditions and techniques, fought for prestige and students, leaving a fertile environment for competition and the pursuit of excellence in swordsmanship. Among these rivalries, one name rang out through the alleys and dojos: Miyamoto Musashi. The 21-year-old wandering samurai had just arrived in the capital, eager to challenge the best swordsman, not only to perfect his art, but also to cement his reputation as an invincible warrior. His primary target was the Yoshioka school, one of Kyoto's most prestigious and influential, led by the master Yoshioka Seijuro, a swordsman famous for his flawless technique and invincible aura. Descended from a lengthy line of samurai instructors and known for his staring practice, a form of meditation that sharpened his focus and perception, Seijuro was the perfect challenge for Musashi, who wanted not only to beat him in combat, but also to surpass the tradition and weight of history represented by the Yoshioka school. Arrogant and defiant, Musashi sent a letter to Seijuro, offering a public duel to compare techniques. The challenge was accepted, and the venue chosen was the field next to the Rendaji Temple on the outskirts of Kyoto. Seijuro, immaculately attired, came to the battlefield on the designated day, escorted by his disciples. He oozed authority and confidence, the outcome of years of training and an awareness of his own mastery. But Musashi was far too late for the duel, and Seijuro kept waiting for him, overwhelmed by impatience and anger. Musashi eventually arrived, carrying his wooden sword and dressed in vulgar clothes, unworthy of a duel of this proportion. He quickly surveyed the terrain and his opponent's behavior. Musashi knew that Seijuro's temper would be his greatest weapon, since he had arrived late on purpose just to upset his opponent. When the duel finally began, the furious Seijuro threw away his bokuto and drew a katana. He wanted to kill the cheeky ronin. Seijuro charged forward with the strength of a tiger, but Musashi, with cat-like ability, evaded the blow. He had predicted Seijuro's reaction and was going to use the anger his opponent felt as a weapon against him. With a single precise and powerful blow, Musashi hit Seijuro's left shoulder. The impact of the bokken was overwhelming, inflicting a sharp, paralyzing pain in the samurai's arm. Astonished and humiliated, Seijuro fell to the ground, powerless to resume the fight. The unbelieving crowd witnessed the fall of the great master, Yoshioka, before a wandering samurai and a simple wooden bokken. Had he had used his sharp blade, Seijuro would have been dead. Devastated by defeat and unable to use his arm, Seijuro left the Yoshioka school and retired to a Buddhist monastery, looking for a new meaning to his life in isolation and spirituality. The era of Yoshioka Seijuro, the Great Kenpo, was over. Musashi's victory spread all over Kyoto, establishing his reputation as a superb duelist. But the fury of the Yoshioka brothers, hungry for revenge, would lead the wandering samurai into a new and perilous battle, testing his limits and carving out the legend that would immortalize him. When Seijuro, the master of the Yoshioka school, was crushed by Musashi, it echoed like thunder throughout Kyoto. The clan's humiliation and the fall of the master, who once epitomized the Yoshioka school's tradition and invincibility, sent the clan samurai into a rage. Revenge became a battle cry. Seijuro's brother, Yoshioka Denshichiro, a swordsman as skilled as his brother and renowned for strength and agility, stepped up to take charge of the school, bent on restoring lost prestige and avenging his family's honor. Denshichiro was an impressive individual with a ferocious edge that intimidated his opponents. His preferred weapon was known as the nodachi, an extremely long and heavy sword that he used to move with breathtaking speed, overwhelming his opponents with powerful attacks. News of Denshichiro's challenge got back to Musashi. The wandering samurai knew that this battle would be even more dangerous than his duel with Seijuro. Denshichiro was not just a skilled samurai, he was the true spirit of vengeance. The fight was scheduled for a place near the capital, an open field in the middle of a pine forest. The crowd assembled to watch the spectacle was even larger than that of the previous encounter, as Musashi's fame had spread quickly, and all wanted to see the outcome of this showdown between two talented and determined samurai. Musashi, having developed a late arrival strategy to rile up his opponents and disturb their focus, decided to adopt a new tactic for this duel. He knew that Denshichiro would be thirsty for revenge and eager to face him. Musashi arrived well ahead of schedule this time. He hid in the pine trees' shade, watching the field and waiting for Denshichiro to arrive. When Denshichiro showed up, he looked like a storm was about to break out. His long sword glittered in the sun, and his face oozed anger and hatred. He yelled at Musashi, "Are you hiding like a coward? Come out and take on my fury." Musashi rose from the shadows, his stance even more relaxed than in the previous duel, and replied with a faint smile, "I was just marveling at the beauty of the forest, waiting for the right moment to begin our sword dance." Denshichiro's fury launched the duel as he lunged forward with a series of powerful blows. Musashi evaded nimbly, his movements quick and unforeseeable, like those of a feline in search of its prey. The clash was a deadly dance of swords, a meeting of wills and spirits. With every move Denshichiro made, Musashi struck back with an accurate and ferocious counterattack, unsettling Master Yoshioka and revealing the weakness in his technique. Through intuition and understanding of the psychological aspects of fighting, Musashi took advantage of Denshichiro's temper, which was grown more and more out of control as his frustration mounted with the passing of time. Musashi quickly and surprisingly defused Denshichiro, knocking his wooden sword out of his hands. Notwithstanding, Musashi used his opponent's own weapon to deliver a fatal blow to his head, terminating the duel in a flash. The crowd fell silent, startled by the fast and violent combat. The proud Yoshioka master Denshichiro slumped in defeat. His revenge turned to dust. Denshichiro's downfall spelled the definitive end of the Yoshioka clan. Their school, once feared and respected throughout Japan, was now destroyed by the hand of a wandering samurai who had proved to be more skilled, more shrewd, and more ruthless than all his masters. The Yoshioka clan's wrath, ignited by the defeat of their two masters, Seijuro and Denshichiro, turned into an unstoppable thirst for revenge. They gathered in great numbers, swearing to destroy the wandering samurai who had boldly defied their tradition and honor. The news that Musashi had accepted the clan's challenge swept through Kyoto like wildfire, and the city was about to witness a show of violence and blood like never before. The spot chosen for the fight was right next to the great pine tree of the Ichijoji temple, a sacred and peaceful setting, but ironically chosen for such a brutal and hopeless encounter. Musashi knew he was facing an unparalleled challenge. The Yoshioka clan would not settle for a traditional duel. They had been preparing for a full-scale confrontation, using all the means at their disposal. He had heard the rumors about the clan's intention and was aware that the number of enemies lying in wait was staggering, but his resolve was even greater. Having learned many lessons from his previous duels, he had developed his own style of combat, rooted in agility, intuition, and adaptability to different situations, which made him an extremely unpredictable and dangerous opponent. Musashi went to the venue on the day of the fight with his heart at ease. He had prepared for the battle not only physically, but mentally as well, purifying his mind and connecting to the essence of his art through meditation. When he arrived at the site, the sunrise shone on the throng of the approaching samurai, all armed with swords, spears, bows, and arrows, ready to take on the wandering samurai. The sight was breathtaking, a horde of fierce warriors, bound together by a thirst for revenge, marauding towards a single man. But Musashi was not fazed. He had chosen the location of the battle carefully, scouting out unfavorable terrain for the Yoshioka, an uneven field with trees and slopes that would hamper their movements. He knew that the Yoshioka were hoping to meet him in an open field, where their attack techniques could be used more effectively, but he would make them fall into their own trap. He was feeling the weight of history on his shoulders, the wounded pride of the Yoshioka samurai who saw him as an intruder in their own territory, a rootless samurai who had the nerve to stand up to a tradition and prestige of the fencing school they so dearly treasured. But Musashi was not cowed by Yoshioka's presence or anger. He had one mission: to prove his worth, firmly establishing himself as a swordsman and write his own chapter in Japanese history. The fight opened with a vortex of steel, a deadly dance of swords and spears. With his fast and unpredictable movements, Musashi dodged Yoshioka's blows, grabbing the opportunities that the uneven and disorganized terrain offered him. He moved like a ghost, his sword shining in the sun like lightning, cutting through the air with precision and savagery. He struck powerful, rapid blows, taking advantage of the Yoshioka's disruption at every turn and the advantage that the terrain offered him. Musashi became more confident with each enemy he took down, his spirit unwavering. He had learned from his defeat at Sekigahara, had reinvented himself, and was now a completely different samurai. His words became an extension of his mind, tools for fighting, but also for self-knowledge and enlightenment. The fight was bloody and brutal, but Musashi was unrelenting, his determination unyielding. He had transformed himself into a force of nature, a samurai who ignored death and pain, fueled by the quest for perfection in his art. He struck the new leader of the clan, the young Matashishiro, who had been elected as the new Kenpo following his brother's deaths. Musashi delivered a fatal blow, ending the fight once and for all. The Yoshioka clan's loss was crippling. Their school, a beacon of tradition and prestige, had been shattered by a single independent samurai, whose spirit and technique surpassed anything they had seen before. Drained after defeating countless enemies, Musashi was asked how he managed to overcome so many foes, and he replied, "Life is littered with obstacles and challenges. One cannot face them all at once. Just like in life, I focused on facing one enemy at a time to achieve victory." Musashi's triumph over the Yoshioka clan was an achievement that rocked feudal Japan, and solidified the wandering samurai's fame as an outstanding swordsman. But the quest for greater honor and perfection did not leave him content. Musashi knew that to become a true legend, he had to defeat other great martial arts masters. Like a sharp sword, he constantly searched for new challenges to sharpen his mind. His path took him to Nara, Japan's ancient capital, a center of Buddhist power and tradition, renowned for its martial arts and historical temples. Amongst the peacefulness of the Zen gardens and the lotus flower beds, the traditional art of the spear, taught by the monks of Hozoin Ryu school, also blossomed. An art of combat as refined as Zen meditation itself was nurtured. Its monk warriors mastered the spear, the Jumonji Yari, a cross-bladed weapon that provided them with unusual versatility, allowing for side-cutting techniques alongside traditional thrusts. They moved fluidly, their motions like a lethal dance, the spear becoming an extension of their own body. The reputation of the Hozoin Ryu school was dreaded throughout Japan. Its monks, used to facing the trials of war and showing their bravery in bloodthirsty duels, were renowned for their masterful wielding of the spear and their fierceness in combat. In their expert hands, the Jumonji Yari was a destructive and beautiful weapon, a war tool that reflected the Zen philosophy of mastery over body and mind. Having already shown himself capable of overcoming fencing masters with different styles, Musashi was now looking to prove his ability against the masters of the spear and broaden his talents as a samurai. He understood that the spear was a dangerous weapon, with a greater range than the sword, and that it required a new way of understanding combat. The samurai was looking for the master of the temple, the legendary Hozoin Ine. This almost mythical figure had perfected the style of combat with the yari. According to legend, the monk developed his weapon when he saw his reflection in the Sarusawa pond, and the crescent moon shaped two new blades on his weapon as it reflected in the water. Upon entering the temple, Musashi was respectfully welcomed by the monks, who led him into the presence of Ine. But the master was an old man, his face weathered by the years, and his eyes looking peaceful and penetrating. The youthful vitality no longer coursed through his veins, but his presence exuded an unwavering wisdom and inner strength. Ine carefully listened to Musashi's demand for a duel, but owing to his old age, the master appointed one of his best pupils to face him. The student, steeped in Zen discipline and the tradition of the Hozoin Ryu school, was to represent the master with honor and provide Musashi with a memorable duel. As the duel began, the atmosphere in the dojo was charged with expectation. The monks sat in a silent circle around the combat pit, their stares fixed on the two fighters clashing against each other. The Hozoin monk stood with the grace and precision of a heron. His gleaming blade shone in the sunlight like a silver ray. Standing with his well-known wooden bokken firmly in hand, Musashi looked at him attentively, noticing the monk's energy and the entire tradition of the Hozoin school vibrating in the air. The monk started the fight with a slight flick of his wrist. The spear cut through the air with a hiss, its main blade pointing at Musashi's chest. The samurai nimbly evaded it, stepping to the side and narrowly dodging the spear by a fraction of a centimeter. However, as the monk pulled the spear back, one of its side blades scraped Musashi's face. This alerted the samurai not to lose sight of the spear at any time. Musashi successfully blocked the second attack with his bokken. The sound of wood against metal reverberating through the dojo made the audience gasp, and the impact shook his arm, but he stood firm. Musashi struck back, and the monk fended him off with the shaft of his spear. He took a step back, maintaining his distance with the tip of the kamayari. Both warriors stared at each other, their eyes locked in a duel as intense as the clash of their weapons. The deadly dance raged on. The monk struck with lightning-fast thrusts and circular spear motions, harnessing his superior reach. With his agility and keen perception, Musashi dodged and blocked the charges, looking for an opening in the monk's defense. Everyone in the dojo was tense. The monks observed in silence, their inscrutable faces reflecting their Zen discipline. The sound of weapons clashing, the fighters panting, and the squeaking of the wooden floor made for a combat symphony. Musashi sensed that he needed to alter his strategy. The monk could not be beaten in long-distance combat. He needed to get closer, breach his opponent's guard, and use his speed and agility to strike the decisive blow. In a burst of inspiration and uttering a war cry, Musashi delivered a powerful blow with his sword, hitting the monk's wrists and leaving his weapon vulnerable. With yet another blow, he defused his opponent, knocking the yari out of his hands. Disarmed and astonished, the monk was at the samurai's mercy. Musashi then lowered his bokken and bowed in respect, recognizing the skill and bravery of his opponent. The duel had ended. Musashi once again prevailed, proving his mastery and ability to adapt to distinctive styles of combat. He had learned to dance with the spear, to sense the reach and power of this ancient weapon, and use the knowledge to his benefit. But above all, he had learned to abide by the tradition and discipline of the monk warriors who had challenged him and helped him flourish as a samurai. In his renowned Five Rings book, in Chapter 1 on water, he likens the samurai to water, adapting to the shape of its vessel. In its liquid state, water immediately acquires the form of its receptacle, be it square or round, and turns into a drop or an ocean. The key to victory is to adapt to the opponent, the environment, and the current circumstances. Staying locked in a single style or strategy is a sure path to defeat. The ability to adjust to change, learn from experiences, and adapt to new situations is essential for personal growth and success in any field. Once the duel is over, Musashi quietly sat in one of the courtyards, admiring the serenity of the place, but his mind was still replaying the intensity of the duel against the spear-carrying monk. The experience had deeply impacted him, leaving scars not only on his body, but also on his spirit. The victory over Ine's protege had shown him the need for adaptability in combat. With its different reach and power compared to the sword, the spear demanded a new way of thinking and moving. Musashi learned that sticking to a single fighting style would make him weak and limit his potential as a warrior. After that duel, Musashi stepped up his quest for a more fluid and versatile fighting style, able to adapt to any opponent and weapon. He started to add elements of the art of the spear to his own approach, learning to use distance and timing to his advantage. However, the duel with the Hozoin monk also brought a deeper understanding of Zen and its practical application in combat. The monk's serenity, his mental restraint, and his connection with the spear struck him. Musashi understood that true strength lies not in one's muscles, but in one's mind and spirit. The drive for perfection, which had previously been focused on sword technique mastery, now broadened to include the body and mind as a whole. Musashi started to seek a balance between physical strength and mental discipline, action, and contemplation. The Hozoin Temple duel was a turning point in Musashi's life journey. He left Nara not only a more accomplished samurai, but also a wiser man. The experience drove him to create the Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryu, the two-sword style that would make him a legend. More than anything, the duel set him on the path to enlightenment, a journey he followed with the same resolve and discipline with which he wielded his swords. From that point on, Musashi's sword was not just a weapon, but an instrument of self-knowledge and change. He became a fully fledged samurai, a warrior who sought victory not only on the battlefield, but also within himself. Miyamoto Musashi's reputation drew the attention of both admirers and prospective challengers. But despite his recent glory, he felt restless. The victory over the Yoshioka brought him recognition, while the duel against the monk had left him with a profound sense of emptiness. What now? Where to go? Which step would he take next on his journey? He found himself at a crossroads, looking for a new purpose for his life. The sword now seemed to weigh heavy in his hands, as a symbol of the violence and uncertainty that had marred his past. He had to find a place to retreat, to reflect on his journey, and to establish a connection with something greater than the art of the sword itself. Musashi was looking for a haven, a place where he could soothe his spirit and find a new meaning to his existence. His steps led him to the Enkoji temple, nestled in the mountains of Harima province. The site oozed peace and serenity, a contrast to the turmoil and violence of the outside world. With their placid faces and precise, delicate movements, the monks nurtured the simplicity and beauty of Zen in every aspect of their lives. As Musashi stepped through the temple gates, he felt the burden of the outside world melt away. The sound of the wind chimes swinging in the breeze, the murmur of the stone fountains, and the scent of incense burning on the altars provided a harmonious and secluded nature. Enkoji became a sanctuary for Musashi, a place where he could lower his guard and connect with his inner spirituality. The monks took him in gently, without judgment or expectations, offering him a place to heal his physical and emotional wounds. Musashi found the inner peace and mental clarity he had lost while fighting duels and going to war. He started practicing meditation with the monks, trying to master his mind and find a new balance between action and contemplation. Enkoji's monks, sensing Musashi's abilities and wisdom, took an interest in his swordsmanship and requested that he teach them. Feeling a new mission burning in his heart, Musashi agreed to the request, seeing in the monks the opportunity to impart his knowledge and help others walk the path of the sword with honor and wisdom. In the improvised dojo of the Enkoji temple, the atmosphere was filled with focus and learning. The morning light shone down on the monks sitting in seiza, carefully observing Miyamoto Musashi as he prepared to teach the principles of Enmei-ryu. Wielding two wooden swords, one long and one short, he explained that the school of the Bright Circle was not based on dogma or strict traditions, but rather on seeking freedom of mind and body, adjusting to any situation, and achieving victory through fluidity and intuition. With elegant and accurate movements, he proved that the sword was not just a weapon, but an extension of one's being, demanding a connection with one's inner strength to be mastered. His emphasis was on adaptability, creativity, and the right response to each situation, without being tied to predefined forms. He encouraged the monks to develop their own intuition, to read their opponent's movements and anticipate their attacks. Keen observation and accurate perception were essential for victory, and Musashi guided his discipline to develop these skills. With each passing day, he delved deeper into the Enmei-ryu teachings, honing his technique and philosophy. But the wandering samurai, notwithstanding the peace he had found in the temple, could feel a growing restlessness inside him. The call of the road, the quest for new challenges, and the urge to test his limits drove him outside the Enkoji walls. He knew that his samurai journey was not over, and that the Enmei-ryu, which was still under development, had to be tested in the fire of actual combat. The western roads of Japan were to become Musashi's new dojo. He roamed from village to village, province to province, his reputation preceding him and attracting challenges from samurai eager to prove their skill against the legend in the making. With each duel came a new lesson, an opportunity to learn from mistakes and refine his technique. He faced opponents with different fighting styles, weapons, and strategies, and, with each victory, his understanding of the art of the sword grew more profound and complex. He carefully observed his rivals, studying their movements, expressions, and intentions. Musashi looked to understand the core of each fighting style, spotting its weaknesses and exploiting its loopholes. Enmei-ryu evolved with each duel, adopting new techniques, new strategies, and a new insight into his opponent's mind. Musashi became more fluid, more adaptable, more unpredictable. In moments of isolation and reflection, Musashi reviewed each fight in his mind, assessing his mistakes and looking for solutions to overcome the obstacles he encountered. He jotted down his observations in a small notebook, a diary of his journey as a samurai and his growth as a martial artist. Like a seed sown in fertile soil, Enmei-ryu was growing stronger, ready to blossom into a new and powerful fighting style. Word of his prowess spread to Shishido Baiken, a reclusive samurai who dwelt in the mountains of Iga province, known for his mastery of the kusarigama. It was a weapon as exotic as it was deadly, able to intimidate even the most experienced samurai. The kusarigama was a unique combat tool, with a sharp scythe attached to a long chain and an iron weight at the tip. It was a versatile and unpredictable instrument that could be used to attack or defend. The chain weight could be hurled at the opponent, knocking them off balance or disarming them, while the sickle cut and tore with its sharp arched blade. Used to fighting with swords, traditional samurai dreaded the kusarigama. Its unpredictability and reach made it difficult to defuse. A single misstep could be fatal, the chain winding around the body and the scythe easily finding flesh. Shishido Baiken had devoted his life to mastering the kusarigama, perfecting his technique in the isolated mountains of Iga. He moved the weapon as if it were an extension of his own body, the chain swinging around him like a metal snake, the scythe poised for a deadly strike. As rumors of Miyamoto Musashi reached him, Baiken suddenly felt a challenge burning in his heart. He had heard stories of the wandering samurai's abilities and his undefeated streak in duels, and he viewed Musashi as an opportunity to prove his own mastery and the superiority of the kusarigama. When Musashi received the invitation, he experienced a chill run down his spine. He knew of Shishido Baiken's reputation and the danger that the kusarigama represented, but he remained undaunted. A new challenge loomed, and Musashi accepted it without hesitation. He prepared for the duel with the earnestness and discipline that had come to distinguish him. He knew that the kusarigama was an unpredictable weapon, and that he needed to work out a strategy to neutralize it. Musashi also understood that he had to keep his temper and emotional control during the duel. With its chaotic and menacing nature, the kusarigama could destabilize the spirit of his opponents, prompting them to act impulsively and fearfully. Musashi trained his mind to keep his focus and composure, even when facing the deadly dance of the chain and scythe. Dueling Shishido Baiken would be a rather unpredictable challenge. A battle against the master of an exotic weapon, a true test of his skills, strategy, and spirit. Deep in a bamboo grove, the two samurai stared at each other, assessing the distance and their intentions. Standing guard, his wooden bokken tightly gripped, Musashi watched Baiken's delicate movements as he kept the kusarigama at his side, the chain wrapped around his arm like a sleeping snake, the scythe glittering threateningly in the sun. A deep silence descended on the woods, only interrupted by the wind blowing through the bamboo leaves and the far-off chirping of a bird. Baiken was the first to move, as quickly as a snake lunging at its prey. He uncoiled the chain of the kusarigama with one smooth movement, the iron weight on the end hissing in the air before being swiped away by Musashi's bokken. Musashi took a step back. He knew he had no choice but to let himself be hit by the weight of the chain, which could either disarm him or break his bones. He had to keep his distance and find a gap in Baiken's defense. The kusarigama master, however, would not give him any leeway. He masterfully spun the weapon, the chain swinging around him like a steel whirlwind, the scythe threatening at every turn. The unpredictability of the kusarigama made the fight even more dangerous. Musashi was constantly on the move, his feet as light as a cat's, his eyes fixed on Baiken's movements. He had to adapt to his opponent's fighting style, find a rhythm that would let him neutralize the threat of the kusarigama. In one quick swoop, Baiken succeeded in trapping Musashi's bokken with his chain, and then got ready to deliver his decisive blow with his scythe. With his weapon suppressed, Musashi was an easy target. However, in a fit of genius, Musashi did something that the tradition of samurai duels did not recommend. He swiftly drew his wakizashi, something Baiken deemed inconceivable, and was completely stunned. Shishido Baiken fell into Musashi's trap, allowing the opponent to grab his weapon and luring him close to the range of a short sword. The kusarigama master still attempted to retreat, but Musashi was already on top of him. With one swift, accurate movement, Musashi finished off his opponent. The kusarigama, a weapon so unlike anything he had ever faced, pushed him to adapt, to think creatively, and use his intellect to overcome the odds. His journey as a samurai would continue, and with each challenge, he would become a more well-rounded warrior, wiser and nearer to the perfection he strived for. As Miyamoto Musashi was forging his legacy through epic duels and the never-ending quest to perfect his art, there was another samurai in northern Japan treading a similar path, building his reputation as one of the greatest swordsmen of his time. His name was Sasaki Kojiro, the master of the swallow's blade. Like Musashi, his story was steeped in legend and reality, but his achievements with the sword were beyond dispute. making him a fitting adversary for the errant samurai. Sasaki Kojiro was born around 1583 under the gray skies of Ichizen Prefecture, present-day Fukui, a mountainous and coastal region in northern Japan, renowned for its strong and loyal samurai. He was born into a samurai family, a lineage that had honed the sword arts for generations, having from an early age exhibited a natural talent for combat. For Kojiro, the sword was not merely a weapon, but an instrument of beauty and accuracy, an extension of his own body. As a child, Kojiro excelled among his peers because of his skill with the wooden sword and his discipline in training. He grasped the teachings of the local masters with astonishing ease, his keen mind understanding the details and nuances of each technique. But Kojiro was not satisfied with replicating what he had been taught. He wanted to push himself further, testing new movement techniques, experimenting with his limits, and forging his own style of combat. Kojiro's reputation as a promising swordsman soon spread outside Echizen. Fueled by the ambition to perfect his art and test himself against Japan's best warriors, he made the decision at a young age to relocate to Kyoto, the former imperial capital, a vibrant hotbed of culture, politics, and martial arts. Kyoto was a teeming melting pot, filled with fencing schools, renowned masters, and different fighting styles. Hungry for knowledge and new challenges, Kojiro delved into this world, acquiring new techniques, sharpening his skills and pursuing the essence of the art of the sword. Sasaki Kojiro was known for wielding a longer sword than normal, the odachi. His sword had a blade of around 90 centimeters. He trained with commitment and discipline, his keen mind analyzing every movement, every stance, every strategy. He not only sought victory in combat, but perfect technique and the harmony between body and mind. During his solitary training sessions in Kyoto, surrounded by bamboo groves and Zen gardens, he developed his most famous technique, the Tsubame Geshi, the swallow counter. According to legend, Kojiro, watching the swallow's swift and unpredictable flight, drew inspiration from the elegance and precision of the bird's motions to craft a unique and devastating blow. The Tsubame Geshi was a quick upward cut, delivered with a wrist twirl that achieved an astonishing effect. The sword, like the wing of a soaring swallow, would change direction at the very last moment, deceiving the opponent and striking him in a vulnerable spot. The technique demanded great skill, accuracy, and timing. It became Kojiro's trademark, a symbol of his prowess and connection with nature. Kojiro's reputation and that of his Tsubame Geshi technique extended to all of Kyoto and beyond. Samurai from different schools, lured by the reputation of the master behind the swallow's blade, sought him out for duels, keen to test their skills against him, and to achieve glory by defeating such a renowned opponent. Ever composed and confident, Kojiro accepted the challenges with the same discipline and decisiveness that led him through his training. Kojiro's duels turned into legendary spectacles in Kyoto. His unique technique, deadly precision, and unforgiving stance drew crowds of onlookers, watching the fights with amazement and trepidation. He faced each foe with respect, but showed no mercy. His sword swooped through the air with the elegance of a swallow, his rapid, fluid movements rendering his opponents bewildered and vulnerable. Kojiro's legend only grew with each victory. He became an icon of excellence in the art of the sword, a master who had pushed the boundaries of tradition and invented his own unique and destructive style. In 1605, established as one of Japan's greatest swordsmen, Kojiro founded Ganryu, the school of the swallow stone. The name expressed the essence of his technique and fighting philosophy, the unyielding force of the rock combined with the agility and precision of the swallow's flight. Ganryu attracted samurai from all over the country, eager to learn from the master of the swallow's blade, and master the Tsubame Geshi, his secret technique. Perhaps the most famous of Kojiro's duels was against Toda Seigen, a renowned swordsman known for his skill with the Kodachi short sword. He was the master of the Toda Ryu school, adept at using this weapon in close combat, where speed and precision were crucial. Kojiro is believed to have defeated Seigen using this technique, proving not only his ability, but also the efficiency of the Tsubame Geshi against an extremely gifted and experienced opponent. The clash was a landmark because Toda Seigen was an established and highly respected master, whereas Kojiro, albeit already talented, was still building his reputation. Defeating Seigen was a watershed moment in his trajectory, securing his position as one of the greatest swordsmen of the era and reinforcing his knack for defeating masters from other fencing schools. The reputation of Sasaki Kojiro reached Hosokawa Tadaoki, a powerful daimyo from Buzen Prefecture in northern Kyushu. A shrewd ruler and ambitious warlord, Tadaoki spotted Kojiro's value as a strategic asset for his clan. He invited him to join his ranks, offering him a prestigious position as fencing instructor for his samurai. Already an established fencing master, Kojiro accepted the offer. He not only viewed the opportunity to protect his financial security and social status, but also as a new challenge for his art. He devoted himself to training the samurai of Tadaoki with the same discipline and strictness that led him to glory, teaching them not only the sword technique, but also the Ganryu philosophy, aimed at harmony between body and mind and the perfection of movements. Kojiro became a revered and admired instructor in the Hosokawa clan. His teachings inspired a new generation of samurai who embraced his technique and philosophy. But Kojiro's notoriety continued to attract opponents from all over the country, seeking to test their skills against the legendary master of the longsword. Loyal to his path as a warrior, he never shirked a duel, upholding his reputation and the honor of the Ganryu school. The famed Miyamoto Musashi, the wandering samurai who succeeded in every duel with his unprecedented two-sword style, soon reached Sasaki Kojiro. He could not overlook the advent of this new arrival, who threatened to eclipse his own glory. Kojiro was initially indifferent to the news. He had already beaten countless opponents, and the thought of yet another samurai striving notoriety did not worry him. However, as the days went by, Musashi's tales became more frequent and detailed, describing his unique technique, his invincible aura, and relentless pursuit of new challenges. Musashi was everything that Kojiro was not, a wandering samurai with neither master nor clan, who rejected the conventional ways and built his reputation on violent triumphs. A settled master serving a powerful daimyo, Kojiro saw Musashi a threat to the order he represented and championed. The roots of this rivalry had been laid. From that moment on, the fates of Kojiro and Musashi would merge on an unrelenting path that would lead to an epic duel, a clash between two of the greatest swordsmen in Japan, the outcome of which would reverberate through the centuries and evolve into a legend immortalized in the history of the samurai. Japan was swarming with rumors. Stories of two exceptional samurai spread by word of mouth, from province to province, fanning curiosity and anticipation of an epic clash. The wandering samurai Miyamoto Musashi and the master of the swallow blade Sasaki Kojiro had become legendary figures, and their names were praised with admiration. In dojos and court meetings, the argument was bound to rage. Who was the best swordsman in Japan? Musashi's supporters lauded his unusual two-sword technique, his feline nimbleness, and his invincible aura. He was the samurai who had already won more than 60 duels, a warrior who had challenged convention and created his own style, suitable for any situation. He's like a god of war, some said. His swords are the manifestation of death itself. Kojiro's supporters surprised his exquisite technique, the deadly accuracy of his subamegeshi, and the elegance of his movements. He was the master of the Ganryu school, a polished and disciplined samurai who had attained perfection through study and constant practice. Kojiro is a sword artist, they firmly stated. His style is an expression of the harmony and beauty of combat and tradition. The rivalry between Musashi and Kojiro became stronger every day, driven by rumors and speculation. There was a clash of styles, philosophies, and personalities. One stood for tradition, the other for innovation. The tension was mounting. The expectation of a showdown was becoming increasingly likely. Japan held its breath, eagerly awaiting the moment when the two sword giants would square off to finally determine the ultimate warrior. The tensions eventually snapped. A letter, bearing the Ganryu skull crest, reached Miyamoto Musashi's hands. The wandering samurai, no stranger to duel invitations, noticed something different about the scroll. The elegant, sharp handwriting and the formal, challenging language revealed the importance of the sender. Sasaki Kojiro was at last inviting him to a formal duel. Kojiro described Musashi's reputation as a warrior of outstanding talent but unconventional methods, and expressed his willingness to compare techniques to determine who was the true master of the sword in Japan. He offered a public duel at a place and date to be set by Musashi, to allow the world to witness the match between the era's two greatest swordsmen. With an ironic smile on his lips, Musashi readily accepted the challenge. He had been waiting for that moment, the opportunity to take on the legendary Kojiro and prove the superiority of his style at once. He wrote a straightforward reply, accepting Kojiro's proposal and recommending a location for the duel: the island of Ganryujima, a small rocky knoll off the coast of the Seto Inland Sea, near the town of Shimonoseki. That was not by chance. Isolated and deserted, the island was steeped in symbolism. Its name, meaning Island of the Swallow Stone, was a nod to Kojiro Ganryu's school and his renowned Tsubame Geshi technique. It was Kojiro's symbolic territory, a place where he felt secure and powerful. By choosing the island, Musashi was presenting a direct challenge to his opponent, expressing his intention to defeat him in his own territory. News of the duel traveled like lightning. All of Japan waited in suspense for the clash between the two sword titans. In the Hosokawa clan fortress, Sasaki Kojiro readied himself for the clash as disciplined and stern as a Zen monk. He knew that the fight against Miyamoto Musashi was to be the greatest trial of his life, a litmus test not only for his sword skills, but also for his spirit. His days were spent on exhausting and intense training. He practiced his slashes with the nodachi, his blade swooping as fast and as precise as a swallow, refining every movement, every wrist turn, every step. He revisited the techniques of the Ganryu school, striving for perfection in every detail, ever subtly. He meditated for hours, draining his mind of thoughts and emotions, striving for the sheer composure and concentration needed to face Musashi. Kojiro also undertook various purification rituals, bathing in herbs and incense, praying to the gods and the ancestors, to cleanse his body and soul of any impurities that could disturb him during the duel. He was determined to enter the fight with his mind and body in perfect harmony, uncluttered by doubts and fears, ready to face his destiny. Just as Kojiro pursued inner peace through discipline and tradition, Musashi approached the duel in an entirely different manner. He paid no heed to rituals or conventional methods. His shrewd mind looked for an edge in every detail, every nuance, and he was quick to try unconventional methods to unsettle his opponent. Musashi knew that Kojiro was a terrific opponent, a sword master who had been preparing himself for the duel for years. To beat him, he would need to harness all the weaponry at his disposal, not just his swordsmanship, but also his intellect and ability to manipulate. Musashi started spreading rumors concerning his own perceptions for the duel, casting a halo of mystery and unpredictability around him. He spoke of new secret techniques he had developed, of long hours of meditation in remote caves, and of encounters with supernatural beings who conferred on him special powers. He knew that such gossip would soon be heard by Kojiro, instilling seeds of uncertainty and doubt in his mind. He wanted Kojiro to enter the duel with his spirit dented, his concentration fractured, vulnerable to unexpected attacks. The battle between Musashi and Kojiro had already started, even before the first sword clash. It was a mind duel, a psychological warfare that unfolded in the shadows, among the hearsay and expectations of a Japan eager for blood and glory. However, after much training and running scenarios in his mind of how the fight could go, Musashi concluded that he would not be capable of beating Kojiro with his two-sword technique, and with just his katana, his opponent would have a significant reach advantage, since Kojiro was the greatest living master of the long nodachi sword. Musashi now had to devise an innovative strategy, or his death was almost guaranteed. When the day the duel arrived on Ganryujima Beach, a small crowd awaited Kojiro's arrival. They included samurai from the Hosokawa clan, some curious noblemen, and a few merchants and peasants who had sailed to the island just to witness the historic duel. Local government officials were also in attendance to assure that the match was run as per the samurai rules and traditions. The atmosphere was silent and expectant, the air as dense as before a storm. Upon landing on the island, Kojiro was met with respectful bowings and salutations. He walked to an open spot near the beach where the duel would occur. His disciples laid out a silk mat on the ground, and Kojiro knelt for one last meditation before the fight. He shut his eyes, took a deep breath, and emptied his mind of any thought or emotion that could get in the way. He was striving for inner peace, a connection with the natural flow of the universe, the mind-body harmony upon which his swordsmanship was based. The sun ascended in the sky. The hours passed, but Miyamoto Musashi did not arrive. If the crowd had been silent at first, they now began to whisper, worried by the wandering samurai's delay. Motionless in his meditation, Kojiro appeared oblivious to the passage of time and the ever-growing anxiety of the spectators. But his peace was only on the surface. Musashi's strategy was in motion. He had deliberately chosen to arrive late, using time as a weapon to undermine his opponent. He knew that Kojiro was a proud and disciplined samurai, used to punctuality and respect for traditions. A delay would anger him, break his concentration, and, if his focus were off, he could start second-guessing himself. At last, a small boat emerged on the horizon. Standing at the bow, Miyamoto Musashi towered like an imposing figure with the sun behind him. His ordinary traveling clothes and unkempt hair contrasted with Kojiro's ceremonial kimono. Musashi carried a long wooden oar, the end of which had been honed and shaped into a long rustic weapon. As he landed, Musashi disregarded the cheers of the crowd and walked straight into the dueling ground, his eyes locked on Sasaki Kojiro. The Ganryu master, now rising from the silk mat on which he had been meditating, looked angry and frustrated by the long wait. Musashi's unexpected weapon choice surprised and unsettled Kojiro, who felt mortified by the lack of respect for the duel's traditions. His confidence was sapped by a sense of doubt and uncertainty. The cold, reasoned strategy of Musashi was now in play. He had used the delay and the makeshift weapon to destabilize his opponent. Kojiro drew his long sword and tossed away its sheath. Musashi smiled and said, "You have already lost, Kojiro. A true swordsman never tosses away his sheath this early." Musashi smashed his spirit even harder with this remark. If Kojiro felt sure of his victory, he would have kept it at his waist, waiting to take his blade back. The most important hour of the lives of the two great samurai had come. Both were in their prime. Musashi was more experienced, but Kojiro had the typical agility and speed of a younger fighter. The decisive moment now arrived. The crowd became silent. The only sound came from the wind rushing through the trees and the waves crashing on the rocks. All eyes were drawn to the two samurai, who were facing each other in the heart of the clearing near the beach. Sasaki Kojiro sprang into attack, his movements as fast and precise as those of a flying swallow. His sharp oar held high, Musashi kept his distance, studying his opponent. Kojiro then decided to use his ultimate technique. It was the Tsubame Geshi, the swallow counter, a fast, sweeping blow with a wrist twist that made the blade switch direction at the very last moment. Yet, Musashi was ready and positioned himself to always keep the sun at his back. As soon as Kojiro launched the Tsubame Geshi, Musashi dodged it and the blade missed his head by millimeters. Using the opening left by the strike and Kojiro's sunburned eyes, Musashi leapt straight at Kojiro with his long oar rising in the air. Kojiro was struck in the forehead. The thud of the impact was horrifying, and some claimed to have heard the cracking of his skull. His nodashi slipped out of his hands and tumbled to the ground. The astonished crowd witnessed the end of the duel that had been heralded as an epic battle. But the reality had been sudden and swift. As always, death had come unexpectedly and violently. There was no joy or exhilaration in Musashi's eyes, only a profound sadness and a strange emptiness. He had prevailed, but the victory had a bitter taste. He had beaten a great warrior, one of the greatest swordsmen. but reaching the summit of his quest to make a name for himself with his sword failed to bridge the void in his soul. News of Sasaki Kojiro's death quickly spread throughout Japan. Everyone was shocked and overwhelmed with disbelief. Many refused to accept that the legendary Ganryu master had been defeated, and all the more so by a wandering samurai with a boat oar. Kojiro's admirers grieved his death and questioned Musashi's approach to the duel, while Musashi's supporters cheered his victory. The Ganryujima duel became a watershed moment in the history of feudal Japan, an event that stirred up controversy and discussions that would last for centuries. Kojiro's death sealed the end of an era. Miyamoto Musashi had truly ascended as Japan's greatest swordsman, but his victory was not purely a personal triumph, but also a burden, one that he would have to bear for the rest of his life. As the dust of the battle still hovered in the air, Miyamoto Musashi left the island of Ganryujima in a small rowing boat. He did not look back. Nothing sparkled in his eyes of victory, but a profound emptiness and sadness gnawed at his soul. Sasaki Kojiro's death, a worthy and revered opponent, had brought him a sense of guilt and disillusionment. The glory he had so desperately sought now seemed empty and meaningless. During the journey all the way back to the mainland, Musashi withdrew into his thoughts, mulling over the meaning of the duel and the path he had chosen. Musashi started to question everything he had believed in until then. The ceaseless drive for perfection in swordsmanship, the need to prove his superiority in every duel, the craving for glory that had been propelling him since his youth. It all seemed empty and meaningless before the fragility of life and the inevitability of death. He remembered the teachings of his monk uncle on the importance of compassion, humility, and the struggle for inner peace. He had disregarded these values in his obsession with the sword and victory. Now faced with Kojiro's death, these words echoed in his mind with new intensity. The passing of Kojiro signaled the end of an era in Musashi's life and the beginning of a new journey, a path in search of a greater meaning to his existence, one that would take him beyond the confines of the sword towards a broader understanding of life and death. He had not yet found that path, but he was determined to do just that. As of that moment, the sword would no longer be his only purpose in life, and the search for inner peace became his new battle. Nevertheless, despite the peaceful years under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan was reaping the fruits of dissent that had been sown in recent times. Toyotomi Hideyori, son of the country's fallen unifier, had become a symbol of resistance to the Tokugawa, while his allies, the remnants of the Western Army, stood ready for a last, desperate stand against the shogun's forces. Although Musashi was searching for a new path, he could not ignore the call of war. While the sword was no longer his sole reason for living, it was still part of his identity, his destiny as a samurai. He had the urge to join the conflict, to test his skills in a real battle once again. Historical sources are unclear about Musashi's role at the Battle of Osaka. Some reports claim that he fought on the side of the Eastern Army, loyal to the Tokugawa shogunate. The now mature samurai may have offered his services as a strategist, advising the Eastern Army generals with his great combat experience and expertise in the art of war. He acted as a keen observer during this period, scrutinizing the tactics and movements of the troops, striving to understand the nature of war and the intricacies of victory and defeat. Regardless of Musashi's role in the Battle of Osaka, his presence in the conflict reflects the period of transition he was going through. He was pursuing a new path, a purpose that transcended the violence and glory of combat. But the sword still appealed to him. War still captivated him, and he was unable to fully detach himself from the world that had shaped him. As a warrior, strategist, or observer, the Battle of Osaka was yet another chapter in his lifelong search for truth and meaning. Following the Battle of Osaka, Japan was solidified under the Tokugawa. The era of major conflicts and the drive for glory on the battlefields was ending, giving way to a peaceful and prosperous period. Musashi, who was now pursuing a new purpose in life, found that war was no longer an alluring direction. He decided to use his vast combat experience and knowledge of the art of war to become a strategist, a military advisor working for a feudal lord. He traveled through different provinces, offering his services to daimyo who wanted to protect their lands and cement their power in the new social order. But Musashi was no ordinary samurai. His reputation as an undefeated duelist, his uncanny two-sword style, and his independent and arrogant personality intimidated some feudal lords who viewed him as a threat to their authority. Once again, Musashi found himself as an outsider, a samurai with neither master nor clan, fighting for his place in a world that no longer prized brute force alone, but also loyalty, diplomacy, and political know-how. While searching for a new master, Musashi decided to carve out a legacy that would surpass his own existence. He adopted 2 young samurai as his sons, giving them his name and teachings, Miyamoto Mikinosuke and Miyamoto Iori. The eldest, Mikinosuke, was a promising samurai with a great knack for the sword. He learned the two-sword style of Niten Ichi-ryu from Musashi and became an accomplished warrior. But fate had a devastating end in store for him. When he became embroiled in a political dispute that endangered Musashi's honor, Mikinosuke chose death by seppuku, the samurai suicide ritual, to honor his adopted father's name. Mikinosuke's death was a huge blow to Musashi. He grieved the loss of his son, but acknowledged the courage and loyalty that had led him to choose death. He then set out to educate Miyamoto Iori, his second adopted son, teaching him everything he had learned about swordsmanship, strategy, and the way of the samurai. The adoption of Mikinosuke and Iori unveiled a new aspect of Musashi's personality. The solitary wandering samurai now wished to build a legacy, to leave a mark on the world that exceeded his own existence. He wanted his teachings and philosophy to outlive him, influencing future generations of samurai. Musashi was still looking for a feudal lord to serve, but now, with a new outlook, he was not only seeking a powerful and prestigious position, but an opportunity to pass on his knowledge and leave a legacy in the world. He was slowly becoming not only a legendary warrior, but also a teacher and a mentor, a guide for young samurai who were trying to find their own way in the shifting world of Edo, Japan. His search for a feudal lord to serve brought him to Himeji, a castle town in Harima Prefecture, renowned for its beauty and towering white castle, a symbol of the power and prosperity of the Ikeda clan. With his reputation as an infallible strategist and duelist, Musashi expected to find an opportunity in Himeji to put his talents at the service of a new master. However, the city presented him with a new challenge, an unexpected duel that would test his skills and his combat philosophy. Miyake Gunbei, a well-known samurai and master of the Tomoe-ryu fencing style, had heard of tales of Musashi's abilities and challenged him to a public duel. A proud and traditionalist warrior, Gunbei was resentful of Musashi's reputation, whom he considered to be an arrogant outsider who disrespected samurai conventions. He wanted to establish that the classic and elegant style of the Tomoe-ryu was superior to Musashi's pragmatic and unusual two-sword style. The duel was arranged for an open field on the outskirts of Himeji Castle, a wide-open and visible location suited to a clash between 2 swordsmen. In true Musashi fashion, he entered the duel site with a quiet, sneering demeanor. He was dressed in basic traveling clothes and only carried 2 wooden bokken swords instead of his famous steel blades. In contrast, Gunbei arrived in grand form, wearing full armor and wielding his ceremonial katana, a sharp and deadly blade. The different looks of the warriors reflected their fighting philosophies. Gunbei valued tradition, honor, and image, while Musashi sought efficiency, simplicity, and the essence of combat. Musashi viewed the sword as just a tool, a means of achieving victory. For Gunbei, the sword was a symbol, an extension of one's own soul. The duel opened with Gunbei taking the initiative, striking Musashi with several powerful and precise blows. But Musashi masterfully fended them off, using his 2 bokken to block Gunbei's thrusts and counterattacking at unexpected angles. The velocity and fluidity of Musashi's movements, together with the unpredictability of his two-sword style, puzzled and frustrated Gunbei, who found himself under increasing pressure. In a fit of desperation, Gunbei tried a descending slash targeting Musashi's head, but he had already anticipated the move. He sidestepped and, with a quick, accurate movement, struck Gunbei's right arm with his bokken, knocking his sword away. Unarmed and humiliated, Gunbei conceded defeat. He knelt before Musashi, bowing his head in respect. With a compassionate look, Musashi held him to his feet. The Lord of Himeji, struck by Musashi's actions and reputation, but still concerned about his independent nature, invited him to an unusual role, taking part in the city's urban and landscape planning. Astounded by the offer, Musashi embraced the challenge. He viewed the opportunity as a way of applying his strategic knowledge and worldview to benefit society by developing a harmonious and safe environment for its citizens. Musashi threw himself into the task with the same effort and discipline that he devoted to his sword training. He learned the principles of town planning and Japanese architecture, observed its topography, assessed the flow and needs of the population. He used his military expertise to devise an urban plan that prioritized the city's defense, the efficient movement of people and goods, and the establishment of pleasant and functional public spaces. Musashi was also invited in designing the gardens of Himeji Castle, creating landscapes that blended natural beauty, peacefulness, and strategic defense elements. He drew on his artistic flair and understanding of nature to craft gardens that invited contemplation and meditation, while also offering observation points and escape routes should an attack occur. Musashi once again displayed his talents for adapting, learning and transforming, finding a new purpose in life, and passing on a legacy that transcended the limits of combat and war. During his travels in Japan, Musashi was brought by fate to an encounter with Yagyu Hyogonosuke, son of the legendary master Yagyu Munenori, fencing instructor of the shogun himself. Despite his youth, Hyogonosuke was already regarded as a sword prodigy, a warrior with exceptional talent and a far-reaching understanding of the art of combat. This would be a titan clash whose outcome would ignite the minds of the people and echo down the centuries. The meeting happened in a bamboo grove next to a sparkling stream, a natural setting that appeared to reflect the duality of both samurai. Their swords were tied to their waists, but the combat appeared to be taking place on a deeper level, a showdown of energies and intentions. They studied each other attentively, recognizing their mastery, the discipline of many years of training, their dedication to the art of the sword. Instead of drawing their blades, Musashi and Hyogonosuke started a battle inside their minds. They imagined each blow of this duel even before drawing their swords. But given the degree of spiritual maturity they both already possessed, they recognized each other as maestros of the respective arts and the futility of a fight that could be fatal, depriving the world of a great swordmaster. Instead of drawing their swords and fighting, Musashi and Hyogonosuke opted to sit down and talk. They spoke about strategy, philosophy, the nature of combat, and the way of the samurai. They shared experiences, concerns, and reflections, finding common ground while respecting their differences. Musashi, the warrior who had built his reputation through violence, found in Hyogonosuke a new type of strength, the will of the mind and spirit. Hyogonosuke, the samurai who had been nurtured in tradition, acknowledged in Musashi the importance of experience and adaptation. The sun was starting to set over the horizon, coloring the sky orange and purple, when Musashi and Hyogonosuke bid farewell, without having drawn swords. They had fought on a deeper level, a duel of ideas and perspective, and both came out victorious. More than a thwarted duel, the encounter was a landmark in their journey. It proved the maturity of both samurai, who had outgrown the need to prove their superiority through violence and had learned that conversation, mutual respect, and the exchange of knowledge were the best way to grow and improve as warriors and as human beings. The legend of this encounter spread throughout Japan, sparking admiration and reflection. Musashi and Hyogonosuke proved that the true strength of a samurai lies not only in their sword skills, but also in their wisdom, self-control, and ability to recognize strength in others. Musashi's experiences, his innumerable duels, his travels, and his reflections led him to new heights of insight into the art of the sword. He had surpassed the empty quest for glory and had found in the sword a path to self-knowledge, discipline, and wisdom. The time had come to impart his teachings, formalize his fighting style, and ensure that his legacy outlasted his own existence. This is how Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryu, the school of the strategy of two heavens as one, was born. The Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryu was not just a collection of combat techniques, but a comprehensive life philosophy, based on the quest for harmony between body, mind, and spirit. Based on his experience, Musashi crystallized his teachings into a single system that included mastery of the two swords, the school's hallmark technique, using the katana and wakizashi in harmony, harnessing the range, speed, and unpredictability in each weapon. The importance of strategy, understanding the terrain, studying the opponent, and adapting to the fighting circumstances as crucial elements for victory. And the nurturing of the spirit, mental discipline, focus, intuition, and composure as the cornerstones for mastering the sword and leading a fulfilling life. Since his adopted son Miyamoto Iori had departed to serve a powerful ruler as a samurai, Musashi started looking for a disciple who could do more than learn his techniques. He wanted an heir to his philosophy, a samurai worthy of understanding the essence of his teachings and passing them on to future generations. Destiny brought him in contact with Hirao Yoemon, a young samurai with exceptional talent, a thirst for knowledge, and an open mind to Musashi's innovations. Yoemon became a devoted pupil of the master, swiftly assimilating his teachings, and displaying an intuitive understanding of Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryu. In Yoemon, Musashi not only spotted a talented disciple, but a kindred spirit, a warrior destined to pass on the legacy of the School of Two Swords. He adopted him as his son, bestowing on him the name Miyamoto, and teaching him all the secrets of his art, readying the young man to become the successor to the Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryu. Establishing the school and adopting Yoemon were important steps in Musashi's journey. He had gone from being merely a wandering samurai, a duelist in search of glory, to becoming a master, a mentor, a keeper of a tradition that he himself had crafted, and which he now confided to his disciple, assuring that his teachings on the sword, strategy, and the way of the warrior would inspire samurai for generations to come. The legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi set out on a new journey in 1634, leaving behind the mountains and battlefields of eastern Japan to explore the warm, lush lands of Kyushu, the large island in the south of the Japanese archipelago. His reputation was ahead of him. Feudal lords and samurai from all over the region had heard stories of the invincible warrior, the master of the two swords, and the founder of Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryu. He was admired by some, feared by others, but all acknowledged his prowess. Now in his 50s, Musashi no longer craved the glory of duels or the ephemeral recognition of the court. He hoped for a place to pass on his teachings, to share the wisdom he had gathered over a lifetime devoted to the sword and the search for truth. Fate led him to Kokura, a thriving and culturally vibrant city on the northern coast of Kyushu, ruled by the Ogasawara clan. Lord Ogasawara Tadazane, a literate governor and enthusiast of the arts, had invited Musashi to be his guest, enticed by the samurai's fame and the opportunity to learn from his broad experience in strategy and combat. Musashi was welcomed to Kokura with honor and respect. Lord Ogasawara offered him a comfortable lodging near the castle. In Kokura, Musashi encountered an atmosphere conducive to reflection and the development of his ideas. He spent countless hours meditating in the castle's Zen gardens, discussed philosophy and strategy with Lord Ogasawara and his advisors, and devoted himself to calligraphy and painting, expressing his worldwide view through art. The stay in Kokura was a peaceful and productive period in Musashi's life. He furthered his studies, refined his teachings, and started writing about his swordsmanship and life philosophy, preparing the ground for the masterpiece that would immortalize him, the Book of Five Rings. The peaceful and calm life in Kokura was suddenly upended in the winter of 1637. On the Shimabara Peninsula, just a few kilometers away, a civil rebellion broke out, led by impoverished peasants and Christians persecuted by the Tokugawa shogunate. Sparked by the oppressive government, high taxation, and religious intolerance, the Shimabara Rebellion rapidly became a threat to the region's stability. Thousands of rebels, armed with farm equipment, stolen swords, and unrestrained fury, attacked villages, temples, and fortresses, swearing revenge on their oppressors. Lord Ogasawara, loyal to the Tokugawa shogunate, did not flinch at the call to suppress the rebellion. He gathered his samurai and prepared to march to Shimabara, bent on reinstating order and the authority of the government. Despite his old age and his search for inner peace, Miyamoto Musashi did not evade his duty. He joined Lord Ogasawara's troops, not as battle-hungry warrior, but as an experienced tactician and wise counselor. With his keen insight and understanding of the art of war, Musashi assessed the rebels' circumstances, their strengths and weaknesses, tactics and intentions. He advised Lord Ogasawara to lay siege to Hara Castle, where the rebels were sheltering, instead of a head-on attack, which could result in heavy losses. Musashi also contributed to the planning of military operations, advising the samurai on combat tactics, the use of terrain, and the importance of discipline and unity among the troops. The Shimabara Rebellion was a bloody and savage confrontation that lasted several months and claimed thousands of lives. While Musashi was reluctant to engage in violence, he displayed courage and skill in combat, inspiring the samurai with his commanding presence and wisdom. One episode reported by several sources say that Musashi was knocked off his horse when a rebel peasant threw a stone at him. Wounded but not yet crushed, he stood up and kept fighting, proving his determination and resilience. The Shimabara Rebellion was finally suppressed by the shogunate's forces, but at a prohibitive cost. The experience made a profound impression on Musashi, cementing his conviction that war was a tragedy to be avoided at all costs. From that time on, his search for inner peace and a path beyond violence grew stronger. He turned to writing about his philosophy and teachings, hoping to share his wisdom with the world and inspire future generations to find harmony and inner peace. In 1640, when Musashi was 56, he relocated to Kumamoto at the invitation of Lord Hosokawa Tadatoshi, a ruler who admired his reputation and was interested in his teachings. But Musashi's popularity continued to draw the attention of young samurai eager to challenge him and test their skills against the legendary swordsman. Uji Yashiro, a master of the Yagyu Hyogonosuke school, a fencing style renowned for subtlety, deceptive movements, and ability to control the opponent's mind, appeared among them. Brimming with confidence and ambition, Yashiro believed he could surpass Musashi with his refined technique and fierce spirit. He challenged the legendary samurai to a duel, arranging to meet at a pine forest on the outskirts of Kumamoto. Although Musashi was already at an advanced age and had been out of action for many years, he readily accepted the challenge. He viewed the young samurai as an opportunity to test his teachings and prove that true sword mastery transcended physical strength and speed. They met in the pine forest on the appointed day, a peaceful and majestic setting where the wind blowing through the trees added to the tense movement. The impetuous and arrogant Yashiro lunged forward with a series of quick, precise cuts. With the composure of someone who had already faced death countless times, Musashi masterfully defended himself, his graceful, fluid movements neutralizing the young samurai's attacks. Musashi refused to be fazed by Yashiro's speed or aggression. He carefully watched him, anticipating his movements and exploiting his weaknesses. In a careless mistake, Yashiro left an opening in his guard, and Musashi grabbed the opportunity. With one quick, decisive move, he disarmed the young samurai and pressed the tip of his sword against his throat. Defeated and humiliated, Yashiro admitted Musashi's superiority not only in his swordsmanship, but also in wisdom and spiritual control. With a compassionate look on his face, Musashi dropped his sword and bowed in respect. He no longer wished to humiliate his opponents, but to pass on his teachings and nurture a new generation of samurai based on respect, discipline, and the search for inner peace. The encounter with Uji Yashiro was Miyamoto Musashi's last battle, a fitting end to the career of one of Japan's most illustrious warriors. He had proved that a samurai's true strength lies not in youth or speed, but in the wisdom acquired over the years, the mastery of the spirit, and a profound understanding of the sword. The duel against Uji Yashiro was the final echo of the rage of the sword in Miyamoto Musashi's life. He then devoted himself entirely to the quest for inner peace and to pass on his teachings, aware that his journey as a samurai was ending. Looking for a shelter for his last days, he secluded himself in a mountain cave, where the wilderness and solitude encouraged him to reflect and contemplate. Once there, far from the noise of the world, embraced by the silent magnificence of the rocks and the whistling wind, Musashi set out to write his masterpiece, a legacy that transcended the limits of the sword and became a guide to life, a testament to the wisdom of one of Japan's greatest warriors. Having pursued the path of the sword for decades, Miyamoto Musashi was no longer enticed by fame and glory. The duels that once fired his ambition now echoed in his memory like ghosts from a distant past. The legendary samurai, Miyamoto Musashi, felt the burden of his years in his bones and the need for silence in his soul. In 1643, when he was 59, he decided on a course of action that astonished everyone. He left the court of Kumamoto, where he was respected and treated with honor, and secluded himself in a mountain cave, looking for solitude. The Reigandō cave, which Musashi chose as his retreat, was a haven of austere beauty and profound serenity. Nestled on a steep slope, its entrance overlooked a valley blanketed by a dense forest of cedars and pines, where the breeze whispered ancient secrets, and a clear stream flowed down the rocks, creating a melody that soothed the soul. The cave itself was modest and bare of any frills. Its cold stone walls harbored the silence of centuries, and the sunlight seeped coyly through the entrance, creating a shadow play across the dirt floor. Without the court luxuries or the distractions of the world, Musashi had the perfect refuge to devote himself to reflection, meditation, and writing. Solitude was not a burden for Musashi, but a welcome partner. It helped him connect with nature, with his own spirit, and the wisdom he had amassed over a lifetime dedicated to the sword. In the quiet of the Reigandō cave, Musashi was working to write his masterpiece, a testament to his teachings, a legacy for future generations. The experiences of a life devoted to the sword, the duels, the journeys, the victories and defeats, the encounters with masters and scholars, all blended together in his mind to fashion a profound and timeless wisdom. He took his brush, dipped it in India ink, and then started writing. His first pieces of writing were a set of 21 precepts, a guide to life based on his own experience and worldview. He called this work Dokudo, the path to follow alone, a testament to his personal philosophy, an invitation to reflect and find an authentic and meaningful life. In Dokudo, Musashi touches on topics such as the importance of discipline, the quest for self-knowledge, the simplicity of life, detachment from material possessions, the rejection of arrogance, and the relentless search for truth. He imparts his worldwide view, shaped by years of training with the sword and observing nature, revealing the depth of his spirit and his grasp of the human condition. But Musashi's masterpiece was still to come. He then committed to write a thorough treatise on strategy and philosophy, based on his extensive experience as a samurai and his studies of the art of war. The Book of Five Rings was born, transcending the realms of swordplay to represent a guide to life, a manual for leadership, and a testament to the wisdom of one of Japan's greatest warriors. In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi splits his teachings into 5 books: Earth, Water, Fire, Wind, and Void, each dealing with a crucial aspect of strategy and its application in different areas of life. He addresses topics such as the importance of observation, adapting to circumstances, mastering time and rhythm, the opponent's psychology, group leadership, and the pursuit of victory in any sphere. Musashi resorts to analogies and metaphors drawn from nature, the arts, and everyday life to explain his principles, making his teachings accessible and applicable to different contexts. He lays emphasis on the importance of ongoing training, mental discipline, self-knowledge, and the never-ending quest for perfection. The Book of Five Rings became Miyamoto Musashi's masterpiece, a legacy that would immortalize him as one of Japan's leading strategists and philosophers. His teachings continue to inspire generations of samurai, leaders, and truth-seekers, transcending the boundaries of time and space. After having completed his masterpiece, Musashi felt that his mission in this world was nearing its end. A mysterious illness gripped his body, enfeebling his muscles and robbing him of his vital energy. However, his spirit, forged through years of training and battles, remained steadfast. Musashi welcomed death with the same dignity and courage with which he had faced his dueling opponents. He assembled his disciples in the Reigandō cave and passed on his last teachings, stressing the importance of discipline, the search for truth, and the transcendence of the sword. During his final days, Musashi dedicated himself to meditation, contemplation of nature, and conversation with his disciples as he shared stories of his life, reflections on the art of the sword, and advice for the future. He was not afraid or regretful, just keenly focused on accepting the natural cycle of life and death. On May the 19th, 1645, Miyamoto Musashi for the last time shut his eyes. His peaceful expression reflecting the inner peace he had attained. He left this world as he had lived it, with courage, dignity, and mastery, leaving in his wake a legacy that would inspire generations of samurai and truth seekers. Inspired by their master's teachings, his disciples planned a simple and honorable funeral in accordance with his wishes. He was dressed in a white kimono, a symbol of purity and peace, and cremated on a ceremonial pyre near the Reigandō cave. The ceremony did not entail any major mourning rituals or demonstrations, just the respectful stillness of nature and the discreet tears of his disciples. Musashi's ashes were placed in a single tomb under the shade of an ancient cedar tree, where the wind and the murmuring stream hummed an eternal melody in his honor. Miyamoto Musashi's presence continued to ripple like waves on a gentle lake, even after his death. His teachings, documented in his writings and passed on by his disciples, became a source of inspiration for generations of samurai, martial artists, and truth seekers. The Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryu, the two-sword school founded by Musashi, flourished under his disciple and adopted son Miyamoto Iori, and branched out into different lineages, preserving the essence of the master's teachings and adapting to the changing times. His principles, such as the importance of observation, adjusting to the opponent, mastering rhythm, and striving for technical perfection, shaped several schools of fencing and martial arts in Japan, such as Kendo, Iaido, and Aikido. But his influence extended beyond the Japanese borders. The Book of Five Rings, which has been translated into several languages, is a landmark for military men, strategists, and leaders around the world, inspiring studies on leadership, decision-making, and conflict management. The story of Musashi has also attracted artists and writers, inspiring novels, films, plays, and artworks that celebrate his remarkable life and his quest for mastery of the sword. Miyamoto Musashi, the samurai who became a legend, left in his wake a profound legacy. He was an invincible warrior, a brilliant tactician, a talented artist, and a profound philosopher. His entire life was a quest for self-discovery, a search for truth, and constant self-improvement. Musashi taught us that genuine strength lies not only in physical strength, but also in mental fortitude, a clear sense of purpose, and the courage to tackle life's challenges with dignity and determination. His quest to perfect the sword has become a metaphor for the human journey, the drive to attain a greater meaning to existence, and the constant evolution of the spirit.